secret plan that David smoked and it pleased the Lord. I bet you really wanna try now, don't ya? Well, you roll it up and toke, you hold it in and then blow it out. Everyone is smoking marijuana, 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 marijuana.
Hey, boys and girls. Welcome back. It is Sunday, September 29th, 2019, and you are viewing, thank you very much for viewing, the Legalize It CNY podcast for this week. That's LICNY. And I'm Gary Colmy. I pop in weekly if I can, and if I can't, then I don't. But I pop in to share with you what's happening in the cannabis community of upstate New York and beyond. Includes all of New York, and we have members across the country really now. But that's where we're at. That's what I'm here for. Excuse me. To talk about what's happening in cannabis. Coming to you from LICNY Studio, right here in downtown Rome's beautiful Arts District, located inside Gary's Music Store, where I do sell musical instruments and musical supplies. Also, in the back of Gary's Music Store, I have gigs, not necessarily jobs for musicians, but Gary's Indoor Garden Supply is what we're talking about when we talk about gigs. I sell stuff to grow stuff indoors. Enough said. Also home of Gigs CBD offerings, specifically the great products of Green Roads and EcoSciences CBD Drip. If you're interested in CBD, come on in and we'll talk about those. Okay, enough for my own commercials. Here's a little video clip for you.
You know, a large number of the people who are vaping are using that to smoke pot through cannabis. And you have been supportive of legalization of marijuana in this state, in New York State. You've tried to push an agenda and legislation as such. So does this kind of give you pause and slowing down on possibility of legalizing marijuana in New York?
No. On marijuana, we're not in favor of smoking marijuana. There are ways to get THC without smoking marijuana. And we don't encourage smoking, period.
I'm not saying you encourage it, but you're encouraging
no
legislation, at least during your last campaign, to legalize it.
Yes. And you...
Did you catch that? Yeah, I did loud and clear. A lot of us did. Let's go on.
Take THC in different compounds and substances without smoking it.
As far as vape, but you do know, you have to admit that a lot of people are smoking it through vape pens.
People are vaping THC. Yes, that is true. And we think that from a public health point of view, that is not something that we recommend, and we think it's dangerous.
All right. So does it give you pause
smoking
about...
of any kind? Smoking cigarettes is worse. Vaping is still dangerous. You can legalize marijuana and sell THC in compounds that do not require you to smoke the marijuana. And we do not support smoking of marijuana. There are compounds that have the THC, which is a compound in marijuana, that you don't smoke.
Absolutely, and some of it is legal here in New York State for medical use. Governor Cuomo mentioning today the emergency.
Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? It's tough to swallow. How do we unpack that garbage? So, Gateway Boy, let's go back, shall we? And yeah, go ahead and slap me around a little bit if you need to. As the guy who was squarely behind the governor's legalization initiatives. Big supporter. Big believer. Believed a lot of what he said. Believed everything he said. There's the guy who commissioned the New York State Health Department to do that study aimed at legalizing cannabis. We could go back and look at that study. I believe I will. But when we do, we'll see how that study even looked at the impact of inhaled cannabis. And it's pretty ironic, isn't it, boys and girls, ladies and germinators, that the New York State Health Department, that the New York State Medical Marijuana Program, at its inception, determined that the only safe way to inhale cannabinoids is through vape pens, to liquefy the material, to blend it with some, well, we're on our third or fourth additive group now, so to blend it with other things, put it in a liquid form, stuff it in a vape cartridge so you could vape it, because that was the only way that was really safe. Well, and now he says there are other ways. Oh, yeah. Basically, you forced every patient who may otherwise use cannabis in an inhaled form to use it the way you and the country have probably mistakenly decided is poisonous. So how do we unpack all that? It's really too much. I encourage everybody in the group to please stay up on it. Understand what's going on, because there's plenty. There's plenty. That's where we are with the vape crisis. New York has outlawed flavors, but we still allow our medical marijuana patients to buy vape cartridges, while Massachusetts has outlawed vaporization of everything, including cannabis, but they still allow people to smoke it. And meanwhile, our governor, where is it? Our governor is meeting with other governors to discuss it all. Now, which governors is he meeting with? Well, that would be New Jersey and Connecticut. New Jersey and Connecticut. Okay. Good. Is it legal in New Jersey? Is it legal in Connecticut? No. Depending on where you are, you have to cross through another state to get to some of those states. That state would be Massachusetts. Open for business still. So let's totally ignore what's going on in Massachusetts, Governor. Speak only to Connecticut and New Jersey. And why would you do that? In an effort to exert control over us? In an effort to make sure that we don't gain the freedoms that we're fighting for? Boy, I'd like to think that's not what's happening, but seems pretty clear to me. So I go back to the connection again. Making the connection, because, folks, this is what it's going to be about. This is what it's going to be about. Big cannabis companies exerting their will upon the people of New York State. That's what it's going to be. And here's what their will is. I don't have to remind you that they want to make millions of dollars, that they're investing millions of dollars, and that's what big business does, and I don't have a problem, actually, with capitalism. What I do have a problem with is when capitalism endeavors to stand in the way of my rights as an American citizen. Here you see some talking points that were sent to the governor by an organization representing medical marijuana providers in New York State. The New York Medical Cannabis Industry Association put forth a 5-point argument against home cultivation. Against home cultivation. Against your right to grow a plant. People who grow that same plant are against your right to grow it for yourself. Because it'll make it impossible for the state to eliminate the black market. It's already impossible. How do we know this? Because you haven't been able to eliminate it in over 100 years. Come on. Home grow will make it impossible for law enforcement to distinguish between legal and illegal products, thus frustrating enforcement efforts. Well, we don't want to frustrate anyone, do we? I mean, how ridiculous. Thus frustrating enforcement efforts. How will we know between legal and illegal products? It's a freaking plant. You really won't, and you'll have to live with that. How do they know in Massachusetts? How do they know in New York when it's already decriminalized to the point where you can have, less than an ounce or so and just get a $50 fine? How do they know if that cannabis was legitimate or illegitimate? Well, in New York, I think we have to admit it's always illegitimate, isn't it? Because we don't have a legal regulatory market. We don't have dispensaries where we can buy cannabis flower legally, so it's all illegitimate, isn't it? Wow. Home grow will undermine the state's harm reduction goal of ensuring that cannabis sold in New York State is grown without noxious pesticides and other contaminants. Right. Let's examine that, shall we? You've got $1 million or more into a cannabis crop. And you develop some pests or some mold, some mildew. Something happens to your plants that makes them less than desirable. You got $1 million at stake, don't you? And someone like that's going to do whatever they have to do to get that material to market. It's only common sense. Compare that to a home grower. There's 4, 5, 6 plants. Little powdery mildew happens. Mold happens. Pests happen. It's not good. We don't like it. It sucks. But we can cut the whole darn thing, bag it, and start over. And there won't be that much lost. Not as much will have been at stake. The only way to know for sure what's in anything, not just cannabis, but what's in anything we consume, is to grow it and make it ourselves. It's not always possible. We can't make a lot of things. But the few things we can, we do. We can grow tomatoes. We can grow produce. And it's always better, isn't it? The closer we are to the garden, whether it's our garden, our neighbor's garden, or the local produce stand's garden. It's always better the closer we get to the actual plant itself, or to the actual beginning product itself. So that's how we'll know. That's how you can know what's in your cannabis. Grow it yourself. more importantly, and I'll say it a million times, a million more, that's how you can tell what's not in it, which these days seems to be what's more important than what's in it, because what's in it happens naturally. What's not in it is things we don't put there. And an industrial grow, they have a whole different set of goals. They have a whole different set of necessities that a home grower does not have. So, home grow will undermine the state's public health interest in ensuring that cannabis in New York is sold, is tested, packaged, and labeled correctly. Well, those things are important. That cannabis sold commercially in New York should be tested, packaged, and labeled correctly. I demand it. Don't you? Don't you demand it for your can of peas, your beef, your box of cereal, anything you ingest? Sure. But home grow won't stop that. A can of tomatoes offered in the grocery store probably has some kind of inspection process before it can be offered, before it can put on the store shelves. It's subject to regulation. Tomato plant behind your house isn't. So both can exist simultaneously quite well. Quite well. And the New York Medical Cannabis Industry Association's final bitch is that home grow will cost the state tax revenue, thus hindering the state's ability to fund priorities such as drug abuse treatment and community investment. Okay. So then it's our responsibility to buy our cannabis where they say, to buy what they say, so they can use the money that we spend to treat drug abuse and to invest in the communities. Well, we don't have a problem with some of the money we spend going to those causes, but we should not be held hostage and demand that the only cannabis we consume has to come from that category. It does not. It does not, and it should not. So, looking at another one here. Okay. So we've, again, I'm skipping around today, and as I discussed last week, I have switched gears a bit. So, as you can see, I've touched on what's happening in cannabis news right now and where our governor happens to stand, and we've got plenty to deal with there. But as I said, I'm going to switch gears, and you're going to hear me promote more and more the idea of home cultivation, because with every bit of news that comes down these days, it seems more and more and more important as a criteria for us securing our freedom. And it seems less likely, if we don't fight like hell for it, that we'll get it. So, let me go over a few more advantages of growing your own. This is not someone's home grow, obviously. I'm sure they wish it were. But it's not. But some of the advantages to growing indoors are, number one, your environment. You can control it 100%. You have control in the environment, and as long as you're taking care of that environment, you will have a very clean and hygienic space compared to the many possible variables that can figure into an outdoor grow. And remember, we don't have the motivation to do things that we shouldn't, outdoors or indoors. The most we'll have is the cost of a half a dozen seeds and some power to keep the lights on. And if it doesn't work out, we can start over. So you do control your climate. You do control your environment, and those who grow cannabis indoors need to understand that you have to create the proper environment for your plants. So your little ecosystem, your own little ways of controlling the room's temperature, its humidity, the airflow in, the airflow out, and the circulation and movement of the air within the room all the time. So those are things you can do indoors, and things that makes indoor cannabis cultivation more beneficial. Another point would be you can do it more than one harvest a year. Obviously, if you do it outdoors, you're subject to the seasons. So indoors, depending on the cultivar that you're growing, depending on the seeds that you get, from seed to harvest can be as little as 8 to 9 weeks or as much as 16 to 18, depending on what you're growing. There's a lot of science in there. And finally, growing is fun. Well, it's a lot of work, too. It's a ton of work. But it definitely is fun, and it can be therapeutic, can be cathartic, and it can be something that people really get into and can be passionate about. So I hope it's something that you'll keep in mind. I know it's not legal for you folks, and I know I grow indoor garden supplies, and we're going to talk about who does what, only to let you, to remind you of things you already know. It's been going on for decades and decades and decades. So, Marijuana Policy Project is a wonderful organization. And again, check them out. They've done some exposés on the benefits of indoor cultivation. They mentioned the product being consistent. They mentioned the fact that it doesn't cause problems. In the 11 states that have legalized adult use cannabis, about half of the medical cannabis states allow personal cultivation. And they make sure you have reasonable safeguards, such as limiting the number of plants per household. They should. And requiring the plants to be secure and out of public view, which is right. But it simply hasn't been a problem. No state has replaced home cultivation. And there has never been, no state has repealed home cultivation. And there has never been a serious push to do so. So once they have it, no state has looked back and say, oh my God, what did we do? People are growing their own. The medical marijuana dispensaries are closing down. It's a horrible scenario. We can't let this happen. Yes, baloney. So, and no, home cultivation, because, when you set up a robust legal market, people are going to use it. The fact is, the great majority of people are going to use that legal market. But again, as I explained last week, if you folks who will be exclusively using the legal market, you need to understand something. The fact that when you walk into a dispensary, when the dispensary owners, when the super cannabis corporations understand that you're buying a product that you could grow at home, then they need to come back with pricing and product that satisfies you. In other words, we hold our feet to the fire just with the knowledge that we can grow our own if we want to. And finally, folks, it's really important for you to understand pricing. To understand that price parity regionally will probably, and I would be willing to bet a week's pay, will definitely be the rule and not the exception. So while the governor is traveling back and forth to Connecticut, he's traveling back and forth to New Jersey, and they're making up things, the blind leading the blind, because none of these states have done recreational yet, have done adult use. While they're hopping and skipping over Massachusetts, they need to look at how the pricing structures work in Massachusetts. The difference between registered patient pricing and recreational adult use pricing, which is basically 20%, because there's a 20% tax on adult use sales in Massachusetts. A lot of patients in New York are clamoring for flower, are clamoring for what Massachusetts has. I just wonder if you understand what the pricing is going to be, if and when you ever get it. Well, if there's price parity, there's another reason that home cultivation can be so important, because it may be your route to relief. I mean, we complain now that New York State's vape pens are overpriced, and they are, and the folks that depend on those inhalables or consumable products are choosing between medicine and rent already. What makes you think it's going to be any cheaper? In what world does that happen? When super corporations are involved, it doesn't. So again, if you can grow your own, it'll be a godsend to you. And if you can't, maybe you'll want to find somebody who can. And they might share it with you. Maybe New York State could come up with a medical marijuana program that allows patients to designate not only caregivers, but to designate growers. Maybe New York could allow some growers to serve more than one patient, thereby exceeding the plant count that an individual is allowed to grow. I mean, all these are possibilities, and all these are happening in other states. So I hope you give serious thought to that. And again, I'm making the connection. It's going to be pretty constant here. Yes, LICNY, Legalize It CNY, seeks a robust commercial cannabis market, a fair one. But it has become quite clear over the past year, and with our fight to legalize, that even when it does happen, and we're going to fight for it to happen, absolutely we're going to fight for it to happen. But when it does happen, it's going to be very costly. And so without that component of home cultivation that keeps everyone honest and secures our freedom, it's all smoke and mirrors and not much smoke, because the governor, again, now he's coming out against smoking. So what are we going to end up with in New York then, right? What in the world could we end up with, right? He says there are other ways. Now, originally, New York said the only safe way, if you want to inhale it and get immediate relief, is through these vape pens, and now the vape pens are evil. They won't even sell them in Massachusetts, and let's not go over the idiocy that the whole vape thing is anyway. But just dealing with what is and what's going to be, yeah. New York told us that the only safe way to inhale cannabis is through a vape pen. And now the governor's saying, no, can't inhale it at all. Well, there are some people who don't do well with cannabis in their bellies. They just don't. And that's the wonderful thing about the plant. You can use it many different ways. Different strokes for different folks. But there are some people who edibles don't work out. So he says you can't vape it. I don't want you to inhale it. You don't want any plant material. Some people can't consume it orally. So what's left? Suppositories? Well, we went over that. From a medical standpoint, I have attended a few lectures on medical cannabis, and believe it or not, cannabis suppositories are very effective. Don't have any experience with them myself, thankfully. But they are, and it seems the tissues inside that part of your anatomy will absorb cannabinoids very effectively. So what's the governor want us to do then? Should New York be the first, I don't know, what would you call it? Backdoor cannabis state? That's the only way you can do it, folks. bend over. You know, the guy just contradicts himself almost at every turn now. But think about that, you know, New York, the suppository cannabis state. The recreational market would certainly have a new light on it, wouldn't it? As far as keeping it away from the kids, I'm thinking the kids are going to say, "Yeah, I'm good. we'll move on to something else." But I don't know. I don't know what the governor's thinking. Do you? Absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. And I wish it were different. I wish I had better news for you. But that's where we are. So today's broadcast, a little over a half hour, is just here to give you ammunition like every other one. Just to give you some food for thought and little bits and pieces here, skip around, I suppose, but to give you ammunition for when you have conversations at home, at work, with family members, with friends, with enemies, in the doctor's office, in line at the grocery store, in the stall, in men's or ladies' room. Wherever you hear a conversation about cannabis, don't hesitate to chime in. If you hear something's wrong, there's some fable or some lies in there, because they abound. And the subject matter is getting more important and more robust and involved every week, and I believe it's probably going to get more contentious every week going forward between now and January. Now, you heard the governor say the things he said, and we remember from last year how it works. When they seek law change, when they seek change, the first thing is going to be for the governor to propose something in his budget. Then the powers that be in New York are going to have to approve it or give it the thumbs down like they did last year and come up with their own. Where is it going to go? I don't know. When you've got people like the governor saying, I don't think people should be able to smoke it. Now, that's his newest. And then I go back to the New York State Medical Cannabis Industry Association baloney, who don't want us to grow, and then think about somebody like some of our government representatives like Diane Savino, down Staten Island way, I believe, stated the same about home cultivation. You know, she likes to call herself a cannabis advocate. But then she drops the ball and says, "Yeah, but you shouldn't be able to grow it yourself." You know, that's when you have to part company. That's when you have to stand up and say, "No, you're an idiot. You're an idiot. It's a plant." Granted, not everyone can grow. Granted, not everyone can have a garden in the back to grow tomatoes. But in what part of America, in what mindset do we disallow people the right, not the privilege, the right to grow a plant for their own use, not to sell it, you know, because it has effects on people and it shouldn't be in the hands of kids, obviously. We should favor decent regulation. We should favor some laws and some rules around it. We should favor a plant count that makes sense, that says, I'm definitely growing this for myself. I'm not setting up a medicine factory and selling it out the back door. However, it should be okay to trade it. Should be okay to gift it. It should be okay to be Vermont. And if we can't do anything else, I'm getting to the point where I shouldn't say it because I know there's more at stake for patients, but I almost don't care if we do anything else. If we would just do what Vermont did, and Vermont does take care of their patients. They have a relatively robust medical marijuana program that does include flower for their patients, and then they allow everyone to possess some cannabis with no fine whatsoever, under the guise of you're doing nothing wrong. We can't let everybody have pounds of it. We can't let everybody grow hundreds of plants, but you can have some and you can grow some. In other words, they set their people free. Why don't we try that? Should that be our plan B? I don't know. I think maybe it should be our plan A. Because if plan B ends up to be what the governor's talking about somehow, they come up with, I don't know, no inhalation whatsoever. I mean, how ridiculous would that be? If our plan A ends up to be what Diane Savino says, we'll have a market, but you'll buy where we say, what we say, when we say, and how we say, and you can't grow it for yourself. That's no plan at all. So again, I'm connecting the dots, and that's what I'll be doing weekly. I hope folks in the group will stay with it, because I have turned a corner here, and it's not that I'm just up and changing my mind or changing direction for no reason. Look, we have to look at what's going on, and we have to react based on what we're faced with. I'm capable, and I hope you are too, of evolving. Big cannabis, corporate cannabis, and their millions and their billions and billions, will probably determine us getting legalization, us getting a legal market, a commercial market. When money is at stake, money in those amounts is at stake, we can make some noise, but it does occur to me that we're nothing. We're nearly nothing. I'd like to say we'll make it happen. The legal market, I'm not convinced we will. I'm convinced it'll happen. I am. I'm convinced it'll happen. But I don't think it's going to be because we fought back against reefer madness, some of those things, which we definitely have to beat down. That's about changing public opinion. That's about changing people around us. But as far as that legal market, that's a money market. That's what market means, right? Money. It's not a legal gift. It's a legal market. So those are the people that are going to determine that happening, and they're going to see it through. We, on the other hand, are the ones that will bang the drum for freedom, as we have been. And freedom means we need to be able to be free to grow it, not only for our own use, but for the benefit of those around us who may not be able to afford the legal market, and to keep the legal market honest, to remind the legal market that we're here, that you better keep it real, you better keep it honest and clean and affordable, and we'll push them as far as we can, and the market will adjust, partially based on those influences. So please, everybody, keep that in mind. It's another beautiful Sunday here in September 29th, 2019. I'm going to go enjoy some of this day. I hope you do too. Please get your friends to join Legalize at CNY. That's the Facebook initiative. Tell your friends, those you know who can't, join a group like ours, and there are a lot of them for employment reasons or for whatever reasons. Yeah, there's still stigma. We have to fight it. We have to beat it back, but there are great people who support us, who can't publicly say so. We still need to love them and bring them on board however we can. So invite people to join the group, and remind those who can't, they can watch the podcast on the Gary Colmy YouTube channel. I post every one. I encourage you to share those. And we'll keep fighting the fight. Keep posting those news articles that you folks find. Keep posting those memes. Try to stay on topic, but, it's okay sometimes to post things for fun. We're human. It's okay. It's okay to vent on the group page. To swear, use foul language. I don't care. We're in a room together. We're adults. Be yourselves. I would just remind you that when you're in public, though, and we will be in the public space, individually and together, that we need to keep it real, need to keep it clean. There are going to be kids around, and we need to be cognizant of our good citizen status that cannabis users generally embrace. So, until next week, then, this is Gary from LICNY's little podcast studio here in the back of Gary's Music, saying, I love y'all. Keep fighting the fight. Peace And
Your
pot.
weed was strong, but you needed proof. This song was made by On the Roof. Its beauty and the thick smoke overthrew you. You fell asleep on my kitchen chair. You broke my table that wasn't really there. And from your lips you drew the marijuana.